Hey everyone, welcome to Admit One podcast. Today we have an actor, comedian, producer, writer, and director who has entertained us for nearly 4 decades in series such as Emmy-winning Robot Chicken, Family Guy, and movies like Austin Powers. Alongside him, we have the co-founder and CEO of Masterfile. Together, they are here to introduce the launch of BBots, the first project from their joint venture entertainment company, Globitron. Please welcome Seth Green and Shaan Bhagat. How are you guys? How you doing?
Great, man. Great.
Awesome.
I feel I'm so happy to see you in person.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I'm going to kind of age myself here. I know you probably get hit up all the time on Austin Powers. I will say I think my favorite role of yours, Seth, is Can't Hardly Wait, when you were the kid locked in the bathroom with the girl. I think you guys lost your virginity or something to each other, but that was like one of my teen era movies, and you were in. So I want to say I've obviously been a fan for a while, but.
Thanks, man. I love that movie. It was a lot of people that all knew each other, and making the movie was kind of like having a party. And we had so much fun. I took that job so seriously. Like it's at the time it was the hardest I'd worked on a role.
Oh, really? Oh, I love it. Yeah. I love it. That was like very symbolic of like there were a lot of like teen movies that were out around that time, because that was around American Pie, and like I mean me and my friends still to this day were always like, who's gonna love you now, Amanda? Like right, like Mike Dexter was like sitting there.
Peter Facinelli is an often unsung comedic genius.
But yeah, I just wanted to shoot you with that because I've been a fan obviously for a long time. And everything that you've been doing, right? You just got nominated for your 22nd Emmy nomination with Robot Chicken, and you guys have been crushing it on that. So, I'm super excited with everything that you're doing, the fact that you're coming into the space, and coming in such a full force. So I guess first off, I'd love to know your story of how you ended up coming into Web3. And I know you've been like going down the rabbit hole for a while, but like, what was it that really piqued your interest? Like, what was your, I guess, NFT origin story?
Well, the straightest path is that Steve Aoki and I have known each other for a long time, and he approached our studio about producing the first blockchain-based linear content. And entertainment's always been a driver for me, how to create something new, how to reach more people, how to put something in the hands of the audience that they haven't seen before. Robot Chicken was, my partners in my first foray into Web 2 before there was broadband, and we were just trying to put linear content on dial-up. So when Steve came to us with the idea of like, I want to make stuff, I want to entertain people, here's a new tech for publishing, here's a new way to, here, a great comp right now in streaming, all of this convergence of these platforms and the cost that people are having to pay to curate any content over time, like Netflix, HBO Max, they're abandoning whole seasons of shows and just, discontinuing the broadcast of them. Those shows literally cease to exist. So the idea of making immutable content that would live on blockchain is a curious new evolution for me. And so Steve came to us in 19. It was like, this is the idea. Or the beginning of 20 it had to be, because he told me to buy an ape in May of 20. And that's what I did. So that's really my origin story. NFT became accepted as both art and collectibles, and was able to be auctioned at Sotheby's alongside Warhol. And Steve was like, there's a collection available with open intellectual property usage that is still part of a 10,000 collective. And I was like, all of that's very, very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I mean, that's really awesome. So was the Bored Ape your first buy?
Yeah. Okay.
I
bought the ape. Well, actually, Steve bought it for me. That's why his name is. It's like his name. It's like it's both our verified names are on the origin of that character.
I mean, I love it. That's awesome. So that means it was May of
Yeah.
2021, May of last year. Then I guess so. Then because here's a
No,
question that I
May of last year we'd already oh no, that's right. It has to be.
yeah.
Yeah.
May of
Well, he bought it for me just before the serum dropped. So I was able to get the original serum and able to mutate the egg.
Okay, so that, yeah, I think that might have been Mayish because like the first or maybe June. I don't know. It was definitely last year at some point because the Bored Apes started minting in May, I think, or late April, early May, something like that. But I guess a
It all
question I have,
feels
it feels like I mean it feels like a decade ago, right? Like that's the
it
way
really
how fast
does.
it move.
But I guess it
Um,
is, right? They just had their first anniversary. That's crazy.
yeah, and so did you? I know you ended up losing the ape, right? Is that what ended up happening?
Yeah. Well, this is it. I fell down the rabbit hole of NFT and also started thinking about all the ways to make use of a CCO contract or like a limited rights retention contract. I've spent the last almost 20 years of my life getting hard versed in what is copyright allowances, what is a licensable right, like what kind of ownership you can have on art, especially once it reaches like a zeitgeist point where the world begins to own it. I've worked under some of the most litigious brands on the planet, from Star Wars to Marvel, and understood what they have to go through to prosecute. So the idea of a collectively owned copyright was super interesting to me, and I started getting into all the projects that had those kinds of usage. And then I just started reaching out to the artists. That was my entree point. Is like, who are all these creatives coming up with all these awesome and exciting ideas, and how can I be a part of that? So that's what I did. I reached out to all the different artists that I thought were super cool. I bought into a bunch of the projects that I thought were like the most exciting to me. Um, but that was the angle. I was just having fun.
Right. Right. No, I think that that's incredible. I think it's interesting because I'm sure these conversations happen. These conversations have been happening a ton, right? With the CCO and what IP usage do you have with the assets that you own, and I think especially with the stuff that you've been working on for the last 20 years is like you understand the nuances of right like of like what's
Yeah.
allowed, what's part of what's included, what can you not
Well,
touch, and
and also
I
what the
yeah.
audience really wants with respect to involvement in it. That was the biggest thing that Shaan and I talked about with our partners in developing this project was what kinds of ways can we empower our holders in the community to use our uh, rails, for lack of a better term, to create their own um, identity within this larger collective. And we always relate it to something like Facebook. Like the impetus for people joining Facebook is to feel a part of a collective. And not just that, but to be able to express their own individuality. This is the music I like. These are my friends. These are my ideas. This is isn't this idea interesting? Like, do you guys like what I have to say? It becomes so much more like assaultingly intimate in that format, rather than saying, hey, our collective is the B-bots. And these are our 5 bots, and here's the story. And then there are 9,900 and 90 other ones, and you can pick yours and
Right,
tell us your story.
right,
And here's how. You can do it
right,
like this in comics, you can do it like this in TV, you can do it like this in music. That's the thing that I think the Apes has done really well, but the barrier to entry is so financially high. It's going to prevent people from being able to jump in, and also it's going to create this a debate between what's the point of this? Is it to make money, or is it to feel a part of a community and creatively express yourself? And is there some middle ground between
right,
both of those POVs?
right. I want to get into that in a second, but before we get into that, I want to. How did you meet Shaan? How did you team up with the guys at Masterfile? I'd love to
Yeah,
know
so
how.
I mean, it's months ago now. We've spent, God, Sean, it
Almost
feels
a
like a
year.
year,
Yeah,
right?
it's
That we've
been
been in
like
on this.
11 months now, I think. Yeah, we're nearing on a year.
We had mutual friends. The whole story of Bebots is like 20 plus years in the making. Our artist, Ben Valvans, came up with these ideas and these characters in the early 90s when he was making fonts pro bono because the internet just needed them. He came up with this idea of these B-bots, these little like almost crudely drawn GIFs of breakdancing robots, and then he embedded them in his font file download. So if you downloaded anything from Fontalicious in the 90s, you've probably got one of one B-bots. And then our mutual friend, Mike McGinnis, who I've known forever, he was in promotions and events and then got into, well, he's one of the co-founders of the app Raya. So he was really an early adopter to internet community-based socializing. And then all of us together had been talking about NFT, our shared enthusiasm for it. And I'd already gotten into developing the White Horse Tavern at that point. And so our whole conversation was, how do we build a project from the beginning that has all of the fun of an NFT project, a traditional NFT project, but also this new utility, this new kind of usage. And we were anticipating merge. And so like all of our conversation is, what's post-merge? You know what I mean? How is all this going to shake out? And what kind of stuff do we want to help build? Like what do we have the opportunity to weigh in on the creation of early enough that we can shape this environment the way we would like it to be?
Mm-hmm. Right. No, that makes so much sense. And I guess, Shaan,
right. But here's what you'll learn about me. That was like, how did you guys meet each other? And then I roll out that. So.
Right. I mean, I love it. I love it. It's good. I mean, I understand why you're such a good storyteller, right? Like you are a great storyteller.
Oh, thanks.
Shaan, so I guess, for those unfamiliar, can you talk a little bit about Masterfile, a little bit about your background before coming into the space, and then, what it's been like from your perspective, like, teaming up with Seth and working with him on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So Masterfile partners with world-class creators like Seth and Stupid Buddy Studios, collectives, and IP owners to basically build out media models for the new digital world that we're entering. So we take very high conviction approaches to basically partnering with really great folks who can make content that people not only want to consume, but purchase. And then we study what that industry looks like and figure out, where does Web3 fit into that? And how do we build out the necessary strategy, technology, and basically implementation to finding success there. So it's been awesome partnering with Seth. I spent about 15 years in the life sciences industry, working at what's called a contract research organization. But, and I've been in crypto since 2016. So I've been through the last bull market, bear market, and then this bull run, and now this bear market. Flew out to Korea to try to build out a decentralized exchange during the last bear market. Met a lot of awesome builders in the space with just a lot of high conviction. And that's really, I really got the bug to build in this space. I realized that DeFi wasn't going to be my thing. And then, a few years later, our co-founder, Ayanong, created a website called Girls Club Asia. It's girlsclub.asia. She wanted to define what does it look like to be a high caliber female Asian creator today. Ended up winning a
award. It's and not at all like whatever base level thinking you're imagining from Girls Club Asia. Like the whole thing is very high level, authentic but classy representations of women.
100%. I love the way you described that. And yeah, like her goal was really just to show what it looks like to be a high caliber Asian female creative today, because so much of media in the Eastern world focused on male creators. So she ended up winning a Webby Award, beating out Twitch and Stack Overflow that year for Best Online Community. And we were talking, and that's when we realized that there's something really special here. And how do we add a revenue model to it that doesn't bastardize the vision and what she's done to create something so special? So we looked at a bunch of different models, things like a two-sided marketplace, because a huge amount of agencies now get their talent from that website. Didn't really excite us, thought it was a really saturated market. Looked at doing things like drop shipping, also not a very exciting model. And this was really towards the end of DeFi summer, the beginning of the NFT boom. And that's where we started looking at like, okay, NFTs are really interesting. I've been in the space for a long time. Aya, our co-founder and the creator of that website, had done a lot of branding for companies in the blockchain space during the bear market. And we were like, NFTs are clearly having a moment. What does it look like for NFTs to exist and be utilized in 4 years? Let's go talk to all the creators that you've interviewed. Let's talk to media companies or world-class creators, and then figure out what is that going to look like? What do we need to build to get there? So we went to ETH Denver in 2021, I think, met our CTO, Garrett Carden, built out an awesome proof of concept for what we call Open DRM, which is the first innovative technology we started building. It's basically a decentralized form of digital rights management. It means that only the owner of the NFT can see the content behind it. When they sell or transfer it, their ability to see it goes with it. So creates a traditional form of ownership and starts to give world-class creators and IP owners the technology they need to protect their media when they bring it into Web3. So it's something we're launching later this year. So we ended up becoming one of the winners there. Ended up going on a fundraising tour, essentially. Raised a really great round from some really great investors. G-Money, we're super happy to have you involved in as well as Delphi and Hashed. And then we started building out some really cool tech. Met Seth through the origin story he talked about. The original idea was, what would it look like to use NFTs to crowdfund the development of a TV show? We started talking about it together, and we're like, why don't we take a step back and understand what we're kind of doing here? And why don't we take a look at not approaching how do we build a TV show, but how do we build an intellectual property where one of the exploitations of that might be a TV show, or maybe it's a comic, or maybe it's a D&D campaign, right?
That's the biggest nuance about this is the deeper I got into the space, the more I realized how much these two entire industries just hadn't talked to each other. You know what I mean? They just never talked to each other. So like everybody that was interested in finance and any of the cryptocurrency or any of this technology, they'd simply never been on a movie set before or really understood how you make a TV show or what it takes to build a cartoon. And everyone was just trying to race to this end goal without really. It's sort of like the second something like Twitter popped up, advertisers tried to figure out how to make money off of it, right? The second Instagram followers became a thing, advertisers tried to determine how to take advantage of those willing, attentive eyes and put their products in front of them, right? And so people kind of can't help but immediately adopt that philosophy of like, oh, if we've got a lot of people looking at NFT, how do we get millions and millions of people to use this? But even that idea is antithetical to building a brand that people have an emotional connection to. It just doesn't come from the same place.
And that's really one of the things we connected on, right? Was like, there's a lot of really great character design, but like, where's the love for the character? Where's the relationship that a fan builds with that property and the characters within it? And that's where we realized that like the first goal is, what does a great IP look like? And partnering with Seth and SBS and Ben, that's really what we connected on. And then the second goal is, how does and if Web3 and NFTs strategically fit into this picture? And how can we do something different with that, essentially? So
because in content, sorry, Shaan, just
go for it, man.
In content creation, it's such a long pathway to prove any kind of financial viability to a brand new idea. And the plus that you get around NFT is this opportunity to sort of supercharge the concept behind Kickstarter, but be able to strengthen a very passionate grassroots movement on behalf of a brand new idea. That just hasn't been possible before. And Shaan and I spent a lot of time talking about how do we make the audience, the holders, feel very involved in the generation of this idea, while also giving them enough investment in the brand itself so that they know where they're going.
Right.
Yeah, no.
And the other thing is, how do we start to invite other people from outside of crypto into this space through this brand, whether they're creators or producers or whatnot, and kind of take a more unfettered approach to our IP, but balancing it out with the utility of actually owning that NFT. And that's one of the things we're really excited about with the project we're launching.
right? How do
Right.
you make a brand accessible to people who just literally don't give a fuck about NFT or
Yeah.
crypto, or who are even like repellent? Every time I post anything on Twitter, even NFT adjacent, I'm still getting like 10% of people who are go fuck yourself, you rich prick. I'm not trying to let you rob me anymore. You shill. I hate now. I hate you. I'm getting a Scott Evil on a stick up. Like people so silly. People so silly, and I'm like, I'm not even actually asking you to buy anything.
Right. No, I mean, but that's so funny, right? And this goes back to what we were talking about, like right before we started recording, right? Is like, there's one thing people are, I think in crypto, people are always talking about the tech. They're like, oh, this tech is revolutionary. It's amazing. It's going to change the world. And people are like, we're going to build a protocol and then everybody's going to build on top of it. But now it's like we have to work on the application layer. Because like at the end of the day, like I know email is incredible, but I don't know how email works, right? Like I don't know, like, oh yeah, you have to go to the STP, TCP IP
Yeah,
servers, and that's how like nobody cares. You just know that you press a button and your email gets sent, right? And we have to get
that's the
there.
real mass adoption.
Yeah,
Real mass adoption is that the consumer doesn't have to think about the how; they just enjoy the process. Like, don't you
right.
remember how much all the programmers were excited when the Snapchat filter was able to like real time map your face, and all
Yeah,
that's just a decentralization of the original Connect engine,
yeah,
right? Once you give the technology to people, it's another 10, 15 years, but
right.
that's even speeding up. So what we're hoping to do is make those tools available to our average holder, um,
Mhm.
even more quickly. Like we want people building and creating on top of this. I apologize, man. My cat is
Yeah, no
she just
She
wants
wants
to
to
be
be a
on
star.
camera.
Yeah, yeah, she
Yeah.
wants to be. I get it.
She
We
doesn't
all
even want
want
to be on famous. She just
to.
wants to be. She just wants to mess up my close up.
um, before we start going into, I guess the actual, because I have a lot of, I guess, well, we'll start there. What excites you the most, Seth, about, like the IP availability and the things you can kind of do that you don't see like in, let's say, Hollywood today, right? Because like obviously you're super successful. You've had an amazing career both in front of the camera and behind it. Yet you're here and you're like, okay, this tech is really revolutionary. What is it that excites you the most about it?
It's that access and the diminishing of middlemen, right? So being able to program directly to an audience and being able to get things financed through unconventional means, just it empowers creators in a way that hasn't existed before. There's been different cycles of independent film success, where the independent models have even become so successful as production outlets that they're purchased by a larger studio. And you see this sort of thing over and over and over again. There's some massive institution, an industrial institution, some minor upstarts come in with a way to revolutionize the game, and they get purchased by the larger apparatus and just sort of folded into their thing. And I've seen it with everything from like, you know, uh, what was that? From what's it called? Telegram to Twitter Spaces, or from Snapchat to Insta Stories. Like there's all these versions of that,
Right.
where a larger studio buys an independent studio. So it just feels like we're cyclically in that constantly. And I just like how abbreviated this path is now between the creators and the audience, and how much opportunity there is through Web3 technology to have your audience involved in a first person way that just has never been available.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And to kind of to that point, right, is like one of the interesting things is, right, I think if you go in and you pitch an idea to, I'm sure, a studio head, and they're going to be like, well, I don't know, is anybody going to like it, right? Like, is there going to be
Right.
like, are people going to even want to digest this content? And now, especially, if you have a community, one, you might not even need to go to the studio head for financing because you're like, well, fuck it, we'll sell
Yeah.
NFTs, we'll do it on our own. But if you do need to
Yeah.
go to studio head for financing, you can be like, yeah, well, we have 10,000 members that will probably watch this, right? And like and they'll talk to their friends about it, right? And it's like you have that real grassroots movement where you have that ownership, that feeling of ownership in the community, and and you just start there, and that I think that increases the virality right out of the gate.
Yeah, Shaan and I started talking about this a lot because when my NFT got stolen, it opened up a ton of conversations about term limits to licensing exploitation and all this other kind of stuff. And then it speaks to what you're entitled to post someone else's development. Like if somebody let's use Batman as an example. So somebody mints Batman, and then DC spends 60 years telling stories on behalf of Batman. And then, the same way that Warner Brothers gives it to Christopher Nolan or gives it to Matt Reeves, in each of those periods, these people are responsible for telling the story of Batman. And they also get a royalty line exclusive to their iteration under the duration of their license contract. And we were like, God, that's so insane to think about. When you trade the hands of an NFT that offers those kinds of rights, you don't get automatic residuals from someone else's development of it, but you do get a clearly defined path towards your own. And in that case, it's applicable exactly to film, animation development, whatever path you want to exploit it to. So, and in that instance, Warner Brothers is the one that holds the license of Batman, and they just allow derivative evolution from different artists. So then we were like talking about building a brand like Deadfellas and thinking of something like Batman as your paradigm comparison. And we were even joking like, God, what do you think in 50 years the floor on Batman is? You have to sort of think about it in those terms, or else you get too in the weeds on stuff that's not going to matter. The real innovation here is the opportunity to collectively own in global copyrights, and to be able to innovate your own story to your own financial advantage and still have it be a part of that larger collective. That's the huge opportunity. And you're right. The validation of that persistent support, walking into a studio and trying to sell them a book or a graphic novel is infinitely easier than walking in and trying to sell them an original idea. Saying, 20 million people read this book. 30 million people read this graphic novel. Make this movie. They made a Sandman limited series on Netflix, but almost 30 years after the book was published. So it just goes to show we're abbreviating that schedule. We're getting things to happen far quicker than they ever have before.
And I'd say the other thing is that there's a really big opportunity to make the media industry more equitable through a lot of things that both of you guys have said. With Web3 combined with Web2 distribution mechanisms and collaboration systems, and then with things like CCO, you're able to create original IP that is non-fettered with the right type of mechanism designed to incentivize people to build on top of it. But what's really exciting is that you can seed your community, you can seed your treasury with non-dilutional funding, you have a direct consumer channel for your brand, and this increases your leverage as a creator when you find product market fit and you want to go up market to making a TV show or a movie. You can say no to a bad deal. You can walk away and wait and continue to build out your brand until you get the right deal at that point. And that's one of the biggest things that we think needs to be solved in the entertainment industry, because 30 years ago, they realized they don't build films. They build IP, and they need to take very large risks because of how they finance their films with large financiers on existing IP that has a fan base. So Web3 becomes this beautiful system where you can build some really awesome models that are fit for purpose for great creators to build original IP. And that's where we're really excited about introducing models like Rising Tide and what we're doing with BBots to get other creators from outside of the ecosystem, from comics to gaming to whatnot, to come in and be like, this is awesome. This is actually a more competitive option for me to create my original IP than going through the traditional film system.
Mm. One of the biggest things I think is critical to advocate too is the embedded royalty paradigms of most of these projects, and how important that actually is. I've seen a couple of proposals to reduce gas fees, and the idea is you eliminate the royalty spectrum for your creators. And I just think that that's the biggest load of horse shit I've ever heard. The entire, one of the greatest pluses of smart contract technology is the guarantee of connection for an artist to their work into infinity. Like that's the, any artist I talk to, the hardest thing that they have to do is chase down their sale percentages. And in every instance, they're getting screwed over by somebody else that's put in a middleman position of transiting their work. And it's not an unnecessary thing. Like, I still think you need people to help you get the word out. You want to hang in galleries and you want to get the validation of a particular brokerage, but anybody arguing against royalties on behalf of the artists is crazy.
It's funny you say that, because I feel very strongly about this as well, where it's like, it's like, it's one of the dumbest arguments I think I've heard, because it's like, literally, this is the person that's creating the value for it.
This is the point of the new contract.
Yeah, like, you want to cut them out because you're trying to save fees. And like, to me, like, I think the most disingenuous argument is those marketplaces that are like, oh yeah, we're going to charge you our marketplace fee, but you have the option to not pay the create. It's like, so the person that's creating the value is not going to get paid, but for you just facilitating a transaction, you're going to sit there and you're going to take your transaction costs, but you're going to cut the creator out. Like, to me, it's like, it's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, and it's just crazy.
It's painfully hypocritical, and this is the hardest part about being so new to the space, is that we're going to suffer all the fools, and we're going to have to determine what we will and won't bear. But that's one of the things I think it's really easy to say that's horseshit. Nobody's gonna
The other thing. I'd say the other thing is that, like, when you talk to creators who are very good at what they do, a work for hire contract's great, especially if that's an IP that you grew up loving, like Superman or Batman. Mm-hmm. But you get your best work or your most original work from creators who you take a bet on their vision with. Like, that's why HBO crushed it for decades, right? They were the best film house to go to get your project financed, because they were like, we love you, we love what you do, here's a bunch of money, go do your thing, right? And like, that's how you get amazing shows, amazing content. So that royalty side of it attracts world-class creators into this. Oh yeah. And this is how you create amazing kick-ass content. And again, if we're talking about media, content is king. So I think this is one of the biggest strategic advantages. And when you start to start to say, we don't need to give creators the royalties that they need, you make a less competitive ecosystem for creators to come into. And then it's going to be harder for crypto to prove its ability to create a really special place inside of media and other industries as well. So it's incredibly important, right? We shouldn't be getting away from it.
That's such a good point, Shaan. It's actually it's incumbent on the work itself to be proven in the audience. You know what I mean? So like, it doesn't matter all of this hedging, all of this prediction, all of these estimates, what everybody thinks is going to be the global mass adoption of any of this technology. Personally, I don't believe that any of it's going to come in those forms. I think a mass adoption of any of this is going to come because the audience falls in love with a character or a story and is willing to go through a process which has been made easier for them by all the people who understand the space. Like, anybody who subscribes to HBO doesn't want to understand the mechanics of how all those programs get paid for, how all those employees get benefited for what they do, and how the content gets delivered through a coaxial cable or a streaming satellite bounce into their home. They don't give a fuck. They just want to watch the show. So I think that's what the big crossover is. It's going to be something that everybody wants to be a part of.
Right. No, I totally agree with. It really is coming down to, it's like, if you look at the internet,
God's such an asshole.
If you look at the internet like 20 years ago, right? Like, if I wanted to like a picture, right? Like, there was no way to do it, right? Like, you had to, like, there's no way for me to just like this picture in some simple way or form. And now today,
you can like it. You just can't let everybody know that you've liked it. You can't share your enthusiasm. Yeah.
But now my grandmother can easily go on and do it, right? And it's like, we're gonna get at that point as well, right? Like, that point is gonna come, I think, inevitably like things will become easier and easier. The key is you just want to make stuff that people want, right? And like that's where the mainstream adoption comes. Like I think a lot of people think it's going to be through gaming, but I think that's because we have that specific subsector. You know, we have a lot of gamers in crypto, and I don't know if that's necessarily the case. It could come through a cartoon. It could come through, I like, you know, if Kanye West does a Yeezy drop like tomorrow, I'm pretty sure a lot of people will be like, I don't know anything about NFTs, but if Yeezy's doing it, like I have to do something, right? And I want to get
I
it.
think it just depends. I think I agree with you that that's going to get a lot of people, but we're also talking about a world where niches of 10 million people are possible. And you can have 10 million people know the hell out of something and have the rest of the 8 billion people on the planet have literally no idea what you're talking about. So getting everybody to cross over into something like Shaan and I have this conversation all the time because I'm not technologically savvy, and I'm constantly talking to him like, all right, my ledger, I did this, I pushed this, I'm getting this response. What is happening? What is happening? And I'm motivated. I'm motivated to learn about this. You know what I'm talking about?
We're in a group chat together, and I think you posted an issue with something last night, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, just because last night during the merge, I was having a really difficult time extracting the Ethereum out of my Punks contract. I'd sold a Punk, and for like several days, I've been trying to extract this ETH, and I keep getting this notice. I don't know. It has to do with like timetable estimations. I'm in a hurry, I guess, whatever. But that's just it. So I'm having trouble, and I'm interested and motivated and also have some of the most informative people around me. Getting my grandma or like my stepmom to do any of this, to even care about any of this, to understand it as a concept beyond what they've heard people get robbed in very easily. That's what mass adoption is. It's making the technology easy enough. You know what it is? You know what you can equate it to? Thanos got invented over 20 years ago. Over 20 years ago. But it took all this time and 15 different movies before my 60, 70-year-old stepmom is like, "Ooh, Thanos is such a bad guy." Right? So that's the runway to mass adoption. Right? Where Oprah knows who Thanos is. And I think all of the fans of Thanos knew this wasn't a conversation you were going to have at Thanksgiving dinner until 20 years later when Infinity War comes out. So everybody who's a crypto enthusiast that is trying to acolyte or proselytize on behalf of apes or punks or Web3, you have to understand, I think, we have to have a patience with respect to what mass adoption really means. And it's not like your mom coming in and talking about the different color ledger she was able to get and what her keychain fob looks like because she's been able to, accessorize with so many stickers. We're never going to have that. The technology is going to have to become so simple that it's like Amazon shopping. You realize anybody who's Amazon shopping easily has already they weren't even aware of like the PayPal innovations. They weren't even aware of like the what's it called, the Square Slide innovation. Like, they don't care. None of that matters. They just want to be able to buy that licorice and get on a subscription for these tissues.
Right. And talking about adoption curves, I think David Lee from Samsung Next Ventures has a really good thought model around this, and he compares it to the adoption of smartphones. From the first smartphone being launched by Android in about 2007 to when we really hit a critical mainstream adoption into the billions, it took about 8 years. And it was a very sharp curve at one point. Once you got to year 3, that curve got very sharp and adoption became massive for 2 reasons. Phones started to become more cost effective at that point, and you had a large amount of developers building apps and content that people wanted that made it a more competitive device than your older phones that people wanted. So I think it's a really great thought model. I think we do have an 8 to 10 year trajectory if everything goes correctly with crypto to find that mainstream adoption. And I think if we compare it to the smartphone adoption curve, we're in year 3 right now. And we're right on like the edge of hopefully another huge increase of mainstream adoption. Hopefully through the bear market, what we see is really great content being created, lower barrier to entry, cost-wise and usability-wise to the technology itself, and a large adoption from different companies and builders to actually build on top of this, not to make it focus on NFTs and Web3, but just to build really cool experiences that happen to be powered by this technology.
Mm-hmm. This space has such a massive leg up on cell phones, though, because if you really look at how cell phones got into mainstream, it was through the use of things like characters. The Verizon guy who's asking, "Can you hear me now?" Like Lily from AT&T that's bringing you in. Jake from State Farm. Like, you get a character that you associate more with the brand than even the functionality of the tool that you're investing in. That's why I think that this whole space has a far shorter runway to what you'd even consider mass adoption. I think everyone just has to get comfortable with what that really looks like. It's not gonna be your stepmom talking about crypto exchange rates. Like, the people who did not care about day trading are still never going to care about day trading. But getting this technology integrated to the same degree that something like the Connect engine is integrated into cell phone, personal creativity usage, I think we're well on our way.
Right. And I guess with that, I wanna show the trailer for BBots and then kind of go a little more in depth on the project itself. And then also, I guess right before that, Globitron.
I got to give this to
How did you
Ben
come up with the
Balvance,
name? I love the name.
Trademarked that name and created a URL 20 years ago. So he knew that Globitron was a thing, and he knew he was going to do something with it. And then he tasked us with helping him to build out the world. But the concept of Globitron is we wanted to build an idea that was maybe good, but also could be questionable as far as what their goals were. And we liken it to something like Amazon, where yes, it is the most convenient utility. It's literally everything you want, but also, I mean, they've got questionable practices with respect to their workers and lack of unionization, or the kind of breaks that they give their people. So it's like you espouse a particular type of ideology, but your internal rhetoric may be in opposition. But we liked a company that said all those hypocritical things with a very straight face and a smile. So that became Globitron. And they're into everything from baby diapers to caskets.
Yeah, I mean, I love it because it's funny because I don't. It feels like the evil corp that would be in a comedy movie, right? To doing exactly what you just said, right?
Sure.
Where it's like, diapers and caskets. Like, why wouldn't they be doing that? Yeah, I love it. I love the name. And I was like, I literally, when I read the name,
that's
I'm like,
our
this is
artist,
such an
man. Ben Balvance is the creator of this original idea, and we have just run with it.
Amazing. So we'll let's show the trailer real quick, and then we'll come right back.
In 1984, advanced robotics engineer Dyson Lawson invented the 5 most cutting-edge robots the world had ever seen. But he didn't trust the corporation he worked for, Globitron, a cradle-to-grave company that make everything from baby diapers to bomb shelters, from microchips to mulch. So he stole his inventions before the evil overlords at Globitron could get their hands on his precious code, a single part of which was embedded in each robot, and he hid them in a secret lair below Manhattan, where the only access to the outside world was his collection of 80s Betamax videotapes. The ones they loved the most were the hip-hop classics. One day, Lawson mysteriously disappeared, and the robots waited patiently for the protector to return, but he never did. Decades later, gentrification brought an end to their private utopia, and the bots were set loose on New York City to showcase their own special skills. MCing, tagging, breakdancing, DJing, and general evil. Introducing the world to the B-Bots. I like that shit.
I love it so much. Yeah,
I
Mike
love it.
McGinnis is old friends with Dougie Fresh, and
Mhm.
who better to be our beatbox than the originator of the beatbox?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I love it. Could you talk about a little bit behind the inspiration of Bebots? I know we got into it a little earlier, but why, like, why now? Why Bebots? Why, you know?
Well, we love the idea of um, well, Ben had already come up with the idea of the Bebots and
Mhm.
Globitron, and then we wanted to tell a story about them that made sense. Um, and we talked about everything from the old TV show Small Wonder, where a robotics engineer who worked for a company developed an AI that looked like a child, a small child, and then he stole the project because the company was going to weaponize her, and this guy's process was to conceal her as a foreign exchange student and dress her in a French maid outfit and make her the housekeeper to conceal her from the company. And we're like, that is so insane. But that idea is really fun, right? A scientist who loves what he's created and doesn't trust the company that wants to weaponize it. And so he steals it, and then to protect them, separates the AI into 5 different code pieces. We love the idea of teaming things up, and the thought that, like Captain Planet or Voltron or any of those ideas, we're like, oh, the Bebot should have something at the root of them that's that. But we wanted to make something that would relate to current day ideas, but using the very earnest and uncynical philosophies of the early 80s, right? There was a time where any problem could get solved on the mic, right? Where any problem could get worked out if you had just practiced your backflip. If you were fast enough to get that guy's mama worked into your insult, man, you were going to take the day. And so we love the idea of some old school characters being faced with the current challenges.
Right.
And the Bebots were our foray into that.
I mean, I love it. I think I told Shaan this the first time I saw the trailer, was like, I'm intrigued. Like, I want to watch. If that was like a show right now, I would definitely watch it. You know what I mean? Where it's like there's
Sweet.
already like a good element of storytelling just in that initial, 1 minute, 2 minute clip. Where I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd watch this if this popped up on my
Well,
feed. Like, you know,
that's the goal, right? So built into that is the rails that we're talking about. So anybody that buys into Bebots or wants to support the brand, they know in 1984, advanced robotics engineer Dyson Lawson built the most advanced AI the world had ever known. So that right there is the guidelines for anybody that comes into this space. We're going to take responsibility for these main 5, and we're going to continue to tell stories about them and show people all the different ways that they can use theirs.
And so I guess, yeah, let's go into that a little bit, right? Because it's almost like a hybrid model, right? Where it's like you're keeping your 5 main ones that you want, and then giving people ownership over their own IP to kind of go out and do whatever they want.
Yeah, it's a very complicated thing, right? To have something that can, it's almost impossible to put 10,000 anything, to put 1,000 anything into a show, into a strip, into a story. But the opportunity with all of these collections is that the world coexists, and the apes or the nouns are a really good example of how this kind of thing can function, right? So you got 10,000 apes and maybe 7,000 holders. So amongst all of those holders, everyone has the same opportunity to make use of their character, whether they want to make a hot sauce or an alcohol, or like in my case, make a whole show. But those characters are still part of the ape collective, and they can choose to or not use any of the existing mythology that's been established about the apes in the public domain. They can use that to their advantage to tell a story about their ape, or they can completely eschew any of that idea in favor of whatever their own idea is. So with Bebots, we're putting our own capital into developing the story of the overarching brand, telling the story of Globitron, telling the story of these bots. But built into that is the ability for any holder to take advantage of those same realities, those same understood ideas within our zeitgeist and tell their own story.
Right. And basically the way we're handling IP rights and utility is we took a lot of inspiration from Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. There's a book that was published in 1875, went into the public domain in 1907. And then Disney built their own proprietary IP off of it, right? It was actually originally a flop in 1953, re-released it, ended up being a huge success for them, pivoted into merchandise, reruns and whatnot. But what was really interesting is they took this public domain IP, they built their own proprietary version of it, they found success in realizing their own enterprise value, and that value distilled back down to the public domain IP and started to attract other great creators and artists and whatnot to build on top of that IP. So then you had Spicy Horse Games in the 2010s build out Alice Madness Returns to the video game. Dan Panosian's a pretty famous comic book artist and creator. He created Alice Ever After with Boom Comics. Even as recently as June of this year, you had Skybound Interactive, which owns the rights to The Walking Dead, to Invincible on Amazon and whatnot. They crowdfunded on Kickstarter their own board game off of Lewis Carroll's IP for $650,000. So that's where we were like, this is really interesting. What does it look like to take this from an exception to a new model using Web3, Web2 Rails, and CCO? So what we're doing is releasing all of these generative PFPs under CCO. Globitron operates as a model and is an example of basically being Disney on this IP, where we've trademarked the Globitron brand, the Bbots brand, and copyrighted our 5 original alpha Bbots inside of that trailer. We take 41.5% of the treasury, put that into the Globitron treasury, and reinvest those funds into hiring really great creators to build on top of our IP and set a really strong example for how you can exploit this IP. Then we put the other half of the remaining treasury into a Nouns Tide Pool, our Nouns Prop House-like system called Tide Pool, which Masterfile has developed. And this means that creators from all over the world, whether or not you own a Bbot, can apply for funding for stories and things that they want to use to exploit the IP. And Bbot holders can vote on their favorite proposals and basically have an impact on how this ecosystem develops. So as a creator, and the other thing we're doing is open sourcing all of the creative assets, so the 3D models that we've built, the Adobe Illustrator files, the SVG files, the Figma files. And with all 3 of these things, between the unfettered rights of CCO, the creative assets being open sourced, and a funding pool, which is very important, we're able to provide creators with all the resources they need to take a risk on building on top of this, while we're finding product market fit and trying to build out the fan base. The last thing I'll say here is that, a lot of people ask, well, if you're CCOing the assets, what's the utility of owning it? So one of the things that we're doing is we're building something called the Terminal. We'll release it in early 2023. And it basically becomes the character sheet for what is canon for your character. Very similar to like Marvel has over 4,000 characters in their database. They have these sheets for each of these characters that defines what is their official background, what is their story, what is their what are they like, and then what are the official issues or movies they've been in. With the Terminal, by owning this character, you define what is canon for your character. What are the attributes? What's the backstory? What's the catchphrase? Which projects that have leveraged your character are officially getting that stamp of approval by you as the owner? And this has a large influence on creators who come into the ecosystem and how they actually utilize your character at that point. So what we're trying to do is balance the right to build on top of this and maximize that as much as possible, whether or not you own that asset, to bring as many creators into this ecosystem as possible, with having a real reason to own this and having significant influence over how people build on top of it, both by having a say financially and by having a say with what is that character actually like officially within this universe that we're building.
Right. I think that's really interesting. I can definitely relate to that, because a lot of times people be like, oh, I want to put like G money in whatever, this game or this comic or whatever. And they're like, well, what do you want them to do or be? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm not in the story, the comic building world. So I'm like, just make me look cool, right? Like that's literally like kind of like what I'll say. But like I'm just like, yeah, I don't know what the canon is in your story. So I think that that's like super valuable, right? So that, you know, people can be like, all right, we want to utilize this character. Oh, this is their backstory. Let's make sure we're congruent with that when we do include it in our story. A question I have to you guys is like, let's say like I buy my own Bebop, I build like some great IP around it and some great lore and have great canon around it. Would I then possibly have the opportunity of maybe like being involved with Globitron and like the main characters in some way, shape, or form, or is that like I'm just kind of
No,
left on my own to build my
we think
IP out on my
the
own?
most exciting opportunity is to create not like a lottery, but a means by which holders can participate in the larger whole. Like I see companies like Non-Fungible Films holding casting calls for new projects. Um, we imagine that same kind of opportunity. Um, One of the reasons that I created Whitehorse was to be able to have a guest star from literally anywhere, whether it's a live action character or an animated character in any form. They could be an NFT or a CG character from an existing film. I wanted Whitehorse Tavern to be a place that anybody could come to, regardless of their format or their ongoing storyline. Like making a place like Whitehorse Tavern, which is similar to Fortnite in that any IP can coexist there seamlessly. Um, with Bebots,
Mhm.
our whole our whole concept is built around the idea of the community being coexistent with us. So it's part of why we're not starting with a movie or starting with a TV show. We really want to build out the world around our community itself. So well, I don't know if we've even talked about this, but what we started with is this like a Sunday morning comic strip. Uh, where we hired an artist, a New Yorker artist, to help us make like 4 panels or single panels and tell a story, tell stories in a very short clip, like about this character. Make a joke, something that's relatable to anybody, but that also just subtly builds out the personality of any of our main bots. Um, and then, similar to the Downs DAO, our
Mhm.
goal is to make projects that the community agrees on, that the community has voted for, participated in the involvement of. And in that instance, our desire is to have other bots appear, like have other people's bots make community content and have it all be under the same umbrella.
Right. Right.
Right, and to add to that, I think like the big thing is that they have an option to work with Globitron if we want to work together, but we're not. It's unfettered IP, so if they want to maximize their upside and build a competitor to Globitron, they have that option to do that. And I think that's one of the best things about this ecosystem. Two is entertainment is a blockbuster economic game. You need to have enough shots at bat with the right financing and the right creators who can build things that people want to actually find success. So there's about a 5% chance that you can build a blockbuster movie or a great IP. That's really what we're optimizing here for. It's not just allowing only the owners of the NFT to build on top of it, but for anybody to do it, we're creating some really great content that can attract anybody into this ecosystem. And then we think from there, we should have enough shots at bat for either Globitron to find product market fit and make this work, or from somebody else building on top of the IP. But no matter what, it's a rising tide lifts all boats scenario that wherever we find success on top of this IP, whether it's another project that finds it or Globitron, everybody who's a fan and builds on top of this IP benefits from that at that point. And we think that's a really great win-win scenario that we really want to introduce and contribute to this ecosystem.
We love that philosophy, and it's been proven to work all every time. Like when everybody succeeds in a new space, it makes that space infinitely more viable. It's the entire faith-based concept of crypto, but it's applicable towards group creativity in this sense, and that's the thing we're most behind.
Right. And I guess one question I have is what happens if the vision of the community doesn't coincide with the vision that you guys have in mind?
Well, there's always that, right? Like there's always that. There's two it's not even arguments. They're just like case facts about that. When you open up a collective to everybody and everybody has the ability to speak on behalf of the collective, you do have an incredible opportunity for bad actors to enter the space and like use your NFT on a t-shirt when they do something horrible like exploit kids or shoot up a school, right? We strongly believe in the fidelity of the total community. And I've seen examples of Web3 clearly stating what the community will and won't bear. I've seen holders kicked out of collectives because they violate what the collective believes are its most dominant ideas and principles. So, you know, as early adopters, we're going to be the beta tests for a lot of the biggest bullshit. But our faith is in the communities themselves. And we really believe that the majority of people entering this space are doing it because they want what we're offering, not to sour the idea for literally everybody. But when you talk about creating a competitor or an alternative POV within the canon of the story, we're here for it. We're super here for it. Oh my gosh, guys, come on. Let's please develop some crazy fan fiction that we can integrate into our larger mythology.
100%. Right. And I'd say like Masterfile, we've got a motto inside of our company, which is especially, and I think this applies to everybody in Web3 right now. It's sometimes we win and sometimes we learn. Both scenarios are fantastic for us. If we end up learning because we were wrong about something, it's going to allow us to hone that in the BBots community inside of Globitron and figure out what's the next thing that we do to find success there. So
it's also eyes wide open. Sorry, Shaan.
Yeah, no, go for it.
It's also eyes wide open that when you let the internet decide anything, it yields Bodie McBoatface. So there's a part of us that just loves that reality and is here for it. You know what I mean?
Right. I love it. I'll tell you what. I, for one, am really looking forward to everything you guys are working on. For people that are that want to find out more, what's the best place for them to go to learn more about the project?
Globitron.com.
Click the button on the top right-hand corner. This is to go discover the BBots and go wild there and check out our Twitter as well.
All right, cool. And when is the
the actual... the BBots are all over Twitter, and there's a bunch of good stuff on it.
There's a lot of fun stuff.
So yeah, deep dive on the Twitter.
All right, cool. And the actual date of the launch?
Allow list mints on the 28th. If there's anything left for public mint, that is on the 30th. And then the reveal starts that night at 5 p.m. We've got some really exciting special events planned for that. So
amazing. I'm looking forward to it. And then one last question before I let you guys go. What's your favorite NFT?
Man, what did I... God, I've bought a couple things that are... I should have my thing open right now. I bought one... I bought a Raf Grassetti that I just saw, and it's part of a collection, but I wanted a print of it. You know, I think the best art is stuff that makes you feel something. And so all of my favorite NFTs are the ones where when I see it, I have an emotional response. And if it's a character, I'll get it a point of inspiration. So
awesome.
My current favorite NFT hasn't been launched yet. It's called Gimme.team. I had a call with the founder last week and resonated with them really well. I think they're very aligned with what we should be doing in crypto. I think they've got a really strong team. It's kind of it's one of those digital celebrities, music stars, but within the K-pop space, which I think has a lot of room to grow and whatnot. So they're building some really cool stuff there. I'm really excited for that launch.
Awesome. All right, cool.
What about you, man? What's your favorite? Is it this punk?
No, there's there was, you know, really early on after I wrote my my Twitter thread and I started getting a following, there was this creator that would always respond to my tweets, and they would post like this Pepe that was twerking every single time, and I would like laugh. I'm like, this is fucking hilarious. And so I'm like, so I hit them up and I was like, hey, why don't we do like a twerking G Money ape? they're like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And then we did the collab together. I think we sold like 5 of them, but like within like 20 minutes of me tweeting it out, they sold out of all their previous stuff. Like I think they did like $10,000 or $12,000 worth of sales on like all their older NFTs. And that was like literally they messaged me and they were like crying. They're like, this literally changed my life. And I'm like, dude, I just liked your fucking artwork. Like it made me laugh and I wanted to do something funny and cool together. And like, I just realized I'm happy that it happened so early on in my journey, because it made me realize just how powerful this was going to be for creators that otherwise were like, you know, getting massively underpaid for their creativity. And I was like, wow, I'm like, this space is gonna be so much bigger than I even thought initially, because it's changing creators' lives. And so that one is like one of my favorite ones for that reason.
I love that. Yeah, the access for creators is unparalleled at this moment. I had a similar thing happen. This collection that just popped into my feed at one point called Avril 15. And it's full headshots. All this one female character, you know, kind of like neon colors and somewhere between retro and future tech, but just the art is beautiful. And I like the icon of it. So I went and bought a couple of them. And the creator reached out to me and just was like, this is our biggest sale. And the fact that I posted about it, or even just put it, now it's got my name inexorably attached to its history, right? So that boosted the project. I really love that opportunity for any of us to help put over art that we love, put a highlight on a community that we love, that we think should get more attention. It is a power, and you have to wield it with responsibility.
Yeah, no, and I think to me that was like a really early lesson, because I had like such a small following at that point, of realizing, oh yeah, like, you know, my decision making and like the things I tweet about and write about is like there's weight on it, right? And just understanding that, you know, it's like, do you use it for good or evil, right? Like you want to make sure you're doing
always use your powers for good.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for coming on the show. I'm really looking forward to everything you guys are working on. I'm super excited. And, you know, Seth, next time I see you, I'm going to come say hi, even if you are surrounded by a ton of people. And
even if Farouk has both of his arms wrapped tightly around me.
Exactly. I'll be right there with him, so it'll be good. But awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show, guys. And thanks everyone for tuning in.